Hello everyone, good morning. Welcome to this presentation. We're going to see some statistics about the Ethereum EVM. Especially, we're going to compare some data. We collected data from 100,000 blocks before last Devcon and 100,000 blocks before this Devcon. We're going to see what changed. I'm Dominic Bruetsch, one of the lead auditors and co-founders at Chain Security. So let's dive right in. But first, I have a question to you. What do you think is the most popular opcode used in the EVM? It's push1. It's mainly used to push small constants onto the stack. Next is push2. It's for larger constants, and this one is especially used to push jump targets onto the stack. Third in row is jump test. This marks jump test in EVM code. You might wonder why we don't see the jump instruction itself being used heavily. And this is due to in the EVM, we have two instructions to jump and jump I for conditional jump. And both together roughly add up to the same number as jump test. Overall, between the data sets of Devcon before the Devcon Bogota and before this Devcon, we see no change in the most popular opcodes. Moving on to the least popular opcodes. Least popular opcode is call code. This is basically a less helpful variant of delegate call, and it's used really few times only. Log0 just emits log events with 0 topics, and invalid opcodes, they basically simply consume all the gas of the current context when they are called. Now, prior to Devcon 7, this changed slightly. Create made it onto the list. It became less popular. Invalid is still on the list. This one is slightly interesting, as this is one of the opcodes that is dominated by one single contract. The invalid opcodes are almost exclusively used by the USDT contract. They have an assert in a CipherMath library they use, which produces an invalid opcode if triggered. Now, especially for the least popular opcode, it may be interesting to discuss some opcodes that do not appear on the list, particularly self-destruct. Since the Cancun hard fork, this opcode has basically become obsolete. Let's ignore some special corner cases here. It now simply transfers all the ether of the account onwards. Investigating this, we were surprised that the opcode is still used for in some cases. And yeah, even more interestingly, we saw that there are still gas tokens deploying new contracts. We don't know why this is still done. We think it's due to legacy code still being triggered by some contracts. Let's have a quick look at the new opcodes introduced since last Devcon. Keep in mind that all contracts deployed before this opcode were introduced won't use them. So all execution you see here must be from recently deployed contracts. Push0 is already used for 0.7 of all opcode we've seen. So this new opcode is already used more than, for example, call data load or mul. You might wonder why tstore is used more than tload, because in a typical reentrancy pattern, you have tstore, tload, tstore. Now, what about precompiles? Prior to Devcon 6, EC recover was by far the most heavily used precompile. It was mainly used by OpenSea's seaport contract for signature verification. Keep in mind that we only have 11 million EVM transactions in our data set, so 2 million users is quite a lot. For SHA-256, the heaviest user was the ETH2 deposit contract. And identity, which is mainly used in Viper for memory operations. Now, before Devcon 7, we see way less EC recover operation. The 4 heaviest users now are Permit2 and Wormhole contract. For SHA-256, the heaviest users are the ETH2 deposit contract and Eigenlayer. And we saw that Viper's popularity rose, and we see this reflected in the identity opcode. Yeah, the least popular opcode, interesting here, It's one single contract that does all the Blake 2 calls. Transaction complexity, the numbers of calls per transaction went down while the memory consumption decreased. Yeah. So super quick summary, push 0 is super hot, easy recover is used less, and there are more calls per transaction. We've prepared a blog post which is not fully ready yet, but will be published soon. It will have full description of the data, more plots, more results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic, for the short presentation, insightful one, of course. Do you have questions for Dominic? Oh, okay. Let me try.
Hi. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting to see how create was one of the least opcodes. Do you have a reason or thesis as to why that is the case?
I'm pretty sure because create 2 became more common, and then the statistics are split, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Next question. Okay.
What can we do with all these new findings?
I think it's important for the core devs and the people discussing the EIP's stuff, especially for the opcodes. It's really good for them to see, right, that push 2, a new addition they recently introduced, is really used heavily and has an impact. And they can take a look at the statistics and see what isn't used so heavily. But of course, it's hard to deprecate something, right, because we still have contracts relying on them.
Thank you.
Last question.